So we're gonna replace this bearing here. We're gonna remove the fork. Here there is a clip that's got to be removed. Okay, we will have to remove this plastic stud here, which acts as a pivot point for the fork of the clutch. And this retaining ring, we're gonna replace it as well. It's kind of held underneath this pivot. It's dark, but normally it's kind of white plastic. You can see if I clean it a bit. So we gotta remove this thing. I'm gonna clean it all around because there's a bit of oil in here, which was coming from the oil pan gasket. So just cleaning a little, and then we're gonna replace these things prior to put the transmission back on. To remove the clip, you need to clamp it with these two frames here. When you clip it, it allows you to open it like that. So the clip was going like this. So you just open it to remove it. You can punch that thing from outside. I just realized there's a hole on the back. So if you have a hard time, you can just use a center punch. And from the back here, it gets in here. To make your life easier. What we want to do is we want to use this wire brush here to clean this spline. Because the clutch has got to be free on that thing here, the center of the clutch disc. Now it's rusted because it's been out there for a long time. So I'm gonna use this thing and try to brush it, and I'm gonna turn it as I go. That's as needed to make it clear all around. I'm gonna try to be careful not to damage this thing here, because I think this thing is aluminum, and obviously this can do damage to that. So I'm gonna make it clean, but keep in mind to save this part. If you look what it did, it's doing a much better than it was. Compare this here to this. Near this sleeve here is very hard to get. Maybe I could remove this thing and try to clean further on, but it's good enough. So now we're gonna have to remove, there's a bearing that fits in here. It's a blind hole bearing, so we're gonna use a special puller to take this thing out. So we're gonna do that. I'm gonna get out of here because it's a cramped space, and I cannot use a puller in such a cramped space. Okay, so the bearing is like a blind ball. So in order to be able to remove that thing, we have to use one puller that is like that. So you insert the puller inside the hole, and when you screw this thing, the fingers, they're gonna spread apart and grip the rolls down there. Okay, we're gonna torque them to grab it as strong as we can. Then with a slide hammer, we're gonna bang this thing out of the shaft here. So that's what I'm up to now. So I'm gonna insert this thing, then tidy it up all good, then slam it out. So this thing is tied up as much as I possibly can. It's kind of still loose a bit, so I'm gonna try to really be on the axis when I'm gonna slam this thing out. So now we're gonna screw this thing up. Transmission is free down there, so I'm gonna try to hold it with my feet as I'm gonna slam this thing out. Make sure transmission is not gonna fall off the wood blocks. Oops, didn't work, so I need to screw that thing even better. Okay. Okay, this tool was a piece of crap. The pushing in, there's a rod that pushes inside, but it was pushing here and the tool was kinking. It has to push toward the end so that the tool open at the end, not in the middle, and then you kink it and it's almost breaking. So what we did is I have a tool that I don't use to extract broken bolts, because it's a piece of S. Oh yeah, now it's stuck inside. It's hard to see inside. I don't know if you can see, but there's one of. I'm gonna show you what it's like. We took one of these things, because it doesn't work at all to extract the broken bolts. So, and we took the one that fits the best and we cut it. So then we insert it at the end of the the bolt that goes in that tool. When we screw that thing inside, it's a bit hard to see, but if you can see here on the side, the shape, so it pushes here, so you can see it kinked here, and here it stays, it's flexible, so when you try to pull it out, the tool just collapsed inside and it was not able to grab the piece from inside. So what he did, he cut this thing that he insert inside of that thing here, so it's on top here, it's on top of this thing here. So then when we screw this thing to expand this, it was expanding also this part and not just this part. So then it was rock solid here too, so then we had a firm grip to pull it out. So this is what he did. And to get this thing out, because it was stuck in there, I have a broken drill bit that's almost the right size, so we just set this thing in the vise. So this portion was sitting on the vise, and with a hammer just punch it out. So as you can see, this was here. We just cut it to use this thing. China. Okay, so I'm gonna drop the transmission oil. So it's right, this plug here. It's a plug that is like this one here. So it's a Allen socket, 8mm. I'm just gonna remove this plug. We're gonna let it drip. Once it's while it's gonna drip, we're gonna fix the bearing, clutch bearing and stuff up front of the transmission. Where's the shaft? And once this is done, we have to put another plug there, and this is the filling plug right here. It's very often they're in the middle of the transmission, but this one is really this one, because they're the same plug for filling and draining the oil. So that's the one. You gotta make sure the green seal here, you gotta make sure it's coming along with it, else it's stuck to the surface. So if it's stuck there, you have to remove it prior to put the new one. You can see there's a little thin line here of black. That is probably like a very thin metal coming out from the wear of the transmission with all the mileage it has. That's it. Going to insert the new bearing. I'm gonna use the tool for the cylinder head bolt as a punch to hit the bottom part of this thing. We're gonna line it up here. I'm using a socket 15mm just to use it as a punch because it's wide enough to hit the outside of this thing to gently tap it in. Okay, then it's time to insert this thing around it. So again, we just pinch it like that to go around. There's a groove on that thing. Okay, then we have to put the new bearing and the new fork. Insert that thing, don't over tap it, the bearing here in the middle. Because we don't want to destroy the bottom part of it. When you insert the new truss bearing on that thing, there's two sides. There's this side here is thicker than this side, so check on your bearing where it was that you had the most wear. My bearing was on the shorter side, so this thing has to go like that. So you just slide this thing in here like that, and the fork has to be wrapped with this wire thing here. This I'm gonna snap the bearing out. It's gonna make it easier to. So we're just gonna slide this thing inside. So the ball at the end of it got to sit in here. We gotta put grease in though first. I'm gonna do that just on that thing here, so that the swivel works good. Not much, just a little touch. Just a little touch. Gonna install this thing here. Then we gotta wrap it up with this wiring here. No, it doesn't want to. So this is just like that. Okay, then we put the truss bearing inside, short side up on my case. It's got a snap into it. You snap it both places. Okay, so now you need to understand that the clutch bearing cylinder is going to be here pushing this thing, and you gotta have the pressure plate here, so the whole thing is going to hold together. So right now this is the best we can do. So all that could have been replaced in here for as for the clutch. Check the wear on my clutch. The wear limit on the clutch, it's kind of confusing what I found on the certain manual shop, but I checked with a brand new clutch, and the thickness, I'll show you. I forgot to put some grease on the clutch cylinder side, so I'm gonna just put it from behind, from the hole here. That's good enough. So the thickness of a brand new clutch from I don't know if you can see, but the rivets here, you got kind of underneath the rivet and on top of a brand new rivet, like on top of a rivet. So underneath, the gap between this part and the clutch, it's 65/1000 of an inch, so 0.065 on a brand new clutch. And from the top of the clutch to the clutch, the top of the bearing, I mean, from the top of the rivet to the clutch, it's 0.110 when it's a brand new clutch. So 110/1000 of an inch, and when it's from the bottom, it's 0.065. So this clutch is almost like brand new for the distance of the rivet, so that's good enough to stay as is. At the bottom of this, it's 26 pound-feet that we found for a torque for this thing. So a brand new one with a brand new seal. I'm gonna remove this thing, don't need it anymore. So this is torque. Yeah, good enough. So I have loosened up this one already. So I'm gonna take a funnel and we're gonna pour the oil in there. So that's what's next. So this thing is about 2 liters of oil, slightly less. You take special oil, you gotta check what it takes. This is like liquid gold at the price they sell this crap. So you do this till it drips, so that's good enough. Then we're gonna torque this thing and we're done. Same torque as the other one. Done.